Hamjambo, this is Ruth Kamau, and welcome to Wasafiri Africa, where we celebrate Africa and things African. eMajwarheni is in the Nonkobe local municipality, Amathole District, in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. The village gets its name from the Tyhume River, which flows from Hogsback Mountains and on its journey to the Indian Ocean borders most of the grounds of Fort Hare University. Founded in 1916 and originally called the South African Native College, the University of Fort Hare has been awarded for its exceptional contribution to Black academic training and leadership development on the African continent, its most famous student being Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. Twendeni, Africa is ready. Today, I am in conversation with a human that embodies a powerful force for connecting people, inspiring entrepreneurs, and is motivated by a passionate love for this magnificent continent, Africa. In true form, Vuyisa Qabaka blew into my life with the force of the Cape wind. In very short order, in the reception of my business, Ikaya Lodge and Conference Center, he introduced himself, pronounced my venture beautiful and noteworthy, and why I needed to network myself with organizations in Cape Town that would not only lift the profile of my business, but also create a network of support for me as a Black woman entrepreneur. The result was amazing for my career and my business, and I also gained a friend. But that's a story for another time. Aptly billing himself as the African rainmaker, Vuyisa Qabaka brings extensive experience across 20 countries in Africa. Vuyisa is partner at a Pan-African innovation firm, Sandbox International, an advisory firm with offices in Nairobi, Kenya, and Cape Town, South Africa, where Vuyisa is based. He's also a trustee at Grootes Keur Hospital Trust in Cape Town. And for anyone who speaks Afrikaans, if I just murdered the name of the hospital, please forgive me. I'm still trying to get around that with my Kikuyu accent. So let's get going with this conversation with Vuyisa Qabaka. Unjani wena Vuyisa?
Disaphila, Ruth. Thank you for having me. I'm alive and well and blessed to the kilt because, again, we live in a beautiful place and part of the world that I'm always happy to be in.
Yes. And you noticed my Xhosa is improving.
I love it.
I'm showing off.
Yeah. Karibu sana.
Asante. Wow, that's a lot easier for me. Okay. So thank you so much for joining me today. You know, I'm so delighted. And from the day we met, I have always looked forward to having conversations with you because we talk about everything. I mean, even now we were digressing and you introduced me to so many people. And today you introduced me to a new person, which is absolutely amazing. So I just want to say before we get going that Vuyisa, the name, it means happiness. And in his, I think it's in your LinkedIn, I'm not sure, where you say, I live every day with the greatest joy, fulfillment, and gratitude. What a life. Constantly winning, constantly striving. Right?
Yep, that's the principle. I have 10 principles and values that govern my life. One of them is that, and I mean, I try to live the embodiment of my name, because ultimately our names are the foretellers of our futures in the way that our parents at the time felt when we were born. And sometimes, especially with me, if you embrace your African name, I don't have any other name. This is the name, it says everything that I'm about. And they saw something in me that I try to live up to every day.
Well, I can tell you do. I think we met in 2008, Vuyisa. I've actually been trying to think, when did I meet Vu? All I remember is that you walked into that door and you owned the space. And I was like, these forces of energy were just coming at me, but they were all good and very inspiring. And, just thinking about names, people know me as Ruth, but my Kikuyu name is Wakavawo. And it means of the buffalo. And as you know, the buffalo is a dangerous animal, right? So I like to embody that as well. Just being brave and going for
Force
it.
of nature.
Force of nature. That's what each and every one is supposed to be in the course of our lives. We are all forces of nature. So, Vuyisa, please, can you tell me a little bit more about Sandbox? Let's start there.
Well, I joined the team sometime last year. A friend of mine, Jerome, is a group CEO. And, I think there's a lot of meeting of minds in our common interests. He's also been traveling the continent and doing the work of empowering the innovators of the continent. In his case, over the course of the past 17 years. In my case, over the past 15 years. And in kind of connecting, I'm a big believer in collaboration and a big believer in not reinventing the wheel and identifying ways to find cohesive collaboration and partnership. One of the things that Sandbox does very uniquely as a business is that it leverages the collective power of strong networks of experts. And I've been on a journey, certainly over the course of the last 5 years, in really understanding what we could do differently on the continent to really arrive at a place where the formula of success for small business and entrepreneurship is something a bit different. In the normal course of how we build businesses on the continent, a lot of those influencing factors come from outside the reality of the continent. Mm-hmm. So we adopt models from the US, from Europe, and some parts of the continent, increasingly now from Asia. And we've really hardly built our own identity on the continent in terms of how we build businesses. And one of the things that I strongly believe in that actually brought me closer to aligning with Jerome on the concept is the fact that one of the hardest things to do on our continent is distribution. So in any business, there are 3 fundamental things that move a business. It's a product. There's always something, even if you're a service-oriented business, you're always selling a product or a shaped product. There's a customer. Somebody has to buy, and you have to figure out who pays for those things that you're purchasing. And primarily, it's the distribution. So if you think of any business, every business, regardless of the type of business it is, has these 3 elements in it. It's got a product, it's got a customer, and it's got a distribution approach. Now, one of the hardest thing to do in Africa is distribution, because we have a broken infrastructure system in our economies. And so it doesn't matter how good your product might be. It might even be the fact that you have some customers in play. You still have to fundamentally understand how to get that product into the hands of your customers. So the thing that sets Sandbox apart is the fact that they look at the way that you achieve success slightly differently. Their model at its core is about a formula they call it the village formula. And the idea is that it takes a village to grow a small business. So who are the people you have around you that are there ultimately to work in supporting the growth and development of your business? And this resonated very deeply with me because for the first 14 years of my time doing the work that I do, we're very fundamentally focused on the idea of a founder-led concept or a vision-based concept. And again, we've struggled with this model on the continent in the sense that it doesn't sufficiently deliver enough success because a lot of this pressure and intensity is placed on the single individual. Again, there's no debate or argument around the contextual need to have a leader, a vision bearer, somebody who was a frontier driver, risk taker, to help build a business and take others along in terms of employees, et cetera, et cetera. But even for that vision bearer, they need to be surrounded by a community of supporters who take them through these various cycles. In the model of Sandbox, we divide this into 35 unique, non-competing expert areas. So again, the practical ones that I think everybody would know is legal and accounting. These are the run-of-the-mill ones. But what about the non-practical ones? What about a business coach? What about a therapist? What about a specialist in one area or other of a business? So what we do with Sandbox is that we surround each individual founder with these 35 unique expert individuals to support the growth and development of their business. So this is what I could say around the uniquity of the model. So I've joined the team now to drive Southern Africa expansion and growth, starting with South Africa primarily as our key market, because it's more in line with where I'm at geographically. But my intention is to take this approach and, of course, take it to the rest of the Southern Africa side, Botswana, Zambia. So we kind of journey with the team. The journey has also kind of allowed me to double down on my investment in Kenya, because I think I've always been...
Kenya's Vui is coming!
I've always been a curious traveler and very much a perennial kind of visitor to Kenya as a country, and appreciating the culture and the environment there. With the team being fundamentally based there, it means that I can literally deepen my relationship with the country and the people of Kenya. So that's also exciting.
As a fellow Kenyan, I will say karibu sana. As I think that you definitely embody this, because how you help me is actually, I was thinking about this, the way you talked about a network here that Sandbox does is what you helped me build with Ikaya. And I remember that's when I registered with FedHasa, with Sawen, and also got more involved with Cape Town tourism, because I'm Kenyan, and I landed in Cape Town having invested in this business when I was working in New Zealand. And then, it's, those leaps of faith where we say, leap and the net will appear. And, the net did appear.
Will conspire.
It did conspire. It sent me Vu. The Cape Town wind just blew you through my doors. And it really made a difference. It really made a difference to me. And so I know a lot of any entrepreneur who is listening to this, or anybody who wants to go through something in the future and build it, knows how important this is. And the fact that you mentioned a therapist, let me tell you what, mental health as an entrepreneur, we can't underestimate it. I'm so happy that we talk about mental health properly these days. It's not like behind closed doors and, turn off the lights and let's use code language when we talk about mental health. It's a thing. Like emotional health, physical health, your brain is you, basically. And so when that starts glitching, things will go wrong.
And I think, just to sum it up in context as well, it's one of the advice that I give to a lot of my entrepreneur mentees is, if you take nothing else from my mentorship and my experience, take one thing. And one of those things is surround yourself with dynamic and amazing people. We take this one point for granted. In the journey of wanting to be the first, or in the journey of wanting to be the only, in the journey of wanting to be self-made, we don't realize that at the core of it, you need to be surrounded with really amazing, dynamic people to help build your vision, your journey. But again, the small kind of print in that is make sure that these are people who are there to support your growth and your journey. They're not there to challenge you. They're not there to put you down. They're not there to make you go through a gauntlet. Yes, they can question you. Yes, they can interrogate you. But it has to be about the constructive context around not only demystifying, but also building up and breaking through at the critical core. Because again, in my time, I've also seen a lot of entrepreneurs in their effort to try and get help being broken down and not built up by the right people that they surround themselves in. And yet they open the door to invite those people in. And those people end up taking everything that they have. And there's many stories like this. So again, it's about kind of being very plugged in terms of the principal need to have dynamic people around you, but they must be in the right areas. And how do you know that they're in the right areas? We all are familiar with a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but we never do a SWOT analysis for ourselves. We do it for our business, maybe as an arm's length exercise. Have you ever thought about bringing that SWOT analysis closer to you and say, as Ruth, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my threats and opportunities? And when you start doing that, you start noticing gaps. If you lean heavily on your strengths and then you strengthen your weaknesses with people around you who can prop you up in those areas of weakness, yeah, you're a lot closer to
where you need to go.
You need to, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's true, Vu. Haters are gonna hate. I mean, you know my story here, and you used to
story
come
for another day.
I'm telling you. And I used to come and I used to vent, and then you'd leave me nice and calm. So I owe you therapist fees, because you always gave me constructive engagement. And of course, there are other people along the way that I've met who've done exactly the same thing. And not forgetting family and that sort of thing.
Course,
it's really good to have support from your family and that sort of thing. So you have a vision for Africa, and I was just wondering, what is your audacious goal for this continent?
So let me premise this in a few ways. Let's build it up a little bit, because I think it's important that we honor that process by building it up and not just regurgitating kind of a structured narrative, because at the day it might not necessarily deepen the conversation. So for me, I think discovering my own Pan-African outlook was also a very interesting personal journey in kind of how I do it. And interestingly, the very first country that I went to visit, Ruth, was Ethiopia.
Oh, yes.
So that was my very first trip. And then Ethiopia connected me to Nairobi. Nairobi connected me to Nigeria, and so on. That's kind of been the journey. So long even before I discovered, my extended cousin family of Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Zambia and others, East Africa was the pathway on my journey to the continent.
The cradle of mankind. I know South Africans are going to say, no, that's the other place.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah.
So my journey with the continent has kind of been a build-up over a number of years, and in Ethiopia was kind of like the first bit of discomfort. And again, I think in the nature of the kind of person that I am was a curiosity around learning what else is out there. So I say thank God for Ethiopian Airlines, because it was Ethiopian Airlines that kind of began that journey, and I've had a love-hate relationship ever since with Ethiopian Airlines because of it. So for me, what it's evolved to, and again, what I've questioned over time, because with each experience, it's kind of widened my curiosity and my interest. And with each experience, it's kind of got me to ask deeper questions. And again, in building up this conversation, you talk a lot about the generation of the 1960s in Africa, and the true renaissance of our continent really can be drawn back to the post-World War II era, because it's been quite significant in what it's done. In fact, our most celebrated heroes, I think, their time on Earth was cut short, and we were denied the opportunity to really fully experience the Renaissance of Africa. They need to be studied more. They need to be understood more. The values in which that they espouse need to be understood better. The context in which they operate. I mean, we take a lot of things for granted now. We in a society now where racism is recognized in the world. We're in a society now where hate speech is recognized in the world. We're in a society now where openness and opportunity and diversity of opportunity is recognized in the world. And I know possibly by the time this gets out, we'll be somewhere in the middle of a very interesting, pivoting time, especially if you listen to this from the United States, in terms of how the government of the United States, the current government of the United States, is looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that even factors in. What I always remind everybody that ever meets me and asks me this question is, I walk the earth as a black man at a particular stage of life from a particular country, which is South Africa, with the background that I have and the context that I have. I've had to learn to elevate my outlook to be a black man from the continent of Africa, as a thing that drives me. Because, if I think too heavily about the stuff in South Africa, it also limits me, because I get so frustrated, so annoyed, so so burnt up about some of the challenges our history has. And yet the biggest opportunity on earth today is the continent of Africa. The biggest opportunity on earth today are the people of our continent. So when I think about the future, I say, how do you recreate the enthusiasm, the optimism, the black excellence of the class of the 1950s and 60s of Africa? That's the foundation I built from. How do I learn from those voices? How do I evolve my thinking from that context and framework, knowing full well that I live now in a time where we have AI, people are thinking about, multi-planetary kind of exploration. So many things are so much better for me in the environment that I live in today in 2024, 2025 than they were in the 1950s and 1960s, where, the challenges that society faced were very deep in as far as, race, circumstances, racism, context, and let alone technology. The world I live in now allows me to say, okay, if I can't change the past, how can I better influence the future? So what makes me the African Rainmaker is fully understanding that. Is saying there is a need to remedy the past, somehow figuring out what that might look like at a human level, if it's to be acceptable. But how important necessarily is that? Is it maybe not better to say we can do certain things to make sure that the past is understood, recognized, and historically contextualized, but we can do more by driving in the windscreen, by looking ahead and building the future alongside all the new technologies that the rest of the world is dealing with. Otherwise, lest we get left behind again. So a lot of my enthusiasm and focus is on building those innovations and technologies of the future and ensuring that Africa is at the forefront of those developments. Not necessarily to close the gap. I think one could debate this and say, is it maybe too late to try and close the gap? I don't think it's necessarily too late.
No, it's not.
I think there are some opportunities that are there. There are some niched conditions that are there. But again, if you look at our continent, and a lot of people hate this word for Africa, we have a profile and a tendency to be adaptive to the next cycle of innovation. So we are leapfrog kind of markets. So, in some countries, in some instances, they never even had landlines. They didn't need to have landlines for telephonic connection. They went straight into cellular connectivity, satellite connectivity. So it's this kind of thinking that I think will ultimately shift the DNA and the belief that Africa genuinely and truly is going to be the future of innovation in the world. So what drives my interest in that future is A, it's driven by innovation, where it's going and how we adapting to it. B, it's this inherent belief in our people. As a singular kind of a monolithic group, which is hard, as you know, Ruth, because colonialism, slavery, and racism has enforced this idea of divide and conquer, or divide to disrupt type of thing. So
very successfully.
The human psychology of making sure that people don't understand who they are, works to serve not necessarily our interests collectively, but to serve a totally different set of interests. And again, my drive as a future, the future of the continent, the possibility of our people, the talents that we have as a people, including the African diaspora.
100%. I don't think we can exclude the African diaspora, and I think it's so important to include that because in Wasafiri Africa, as the name entails, Wasafiri means to the people who travel, and we're traveling across the continent, and it's natural for us to travel. The human being is not meant to stay in one spot. We are all meant to go on a walkabout, and in this course of the walkabout on the continent, Vu has discovered and enlivened his passion for the continent and now considers himself as an African, as opposed to just being a South African. And there's so many things that you raise there, Fu, because I was thinking about, now we have a name for fake news, We have actually a name for it. It's in our vocabulary. Whereas when you think about when the founding fathers, when they became the first leaders of independent Africa, there was so much fake news that was peddled around them that led to their assassinations and that sort of thing. So we never got to be.
I call them white lies.
Yeah. Call them what you want, that's the liberty we have as human beings. But the fact is, it was a lie, and so people were assassinated who were the best thing that happened to Africa.
Yep.
But because of the vested interests that you have mentioned, that were going to profit off mineral resources, that were going to profit off the labor of the people, that were going to profit off the climate, dare I say, they were going to profit over so many different aspects. It was suitable for those colonial powers, and some of them it's mercantile. They, like neocolonialism comes in many ways, and so we need as Africans to understand what it is that we have as a continent.
Yep.
It's like someone coming in and saying, "Gosh, your house is so beautiful. Yeah. Why don't you go sleep in the shed?" I mean, it's my house, so we need to be proud about our house. And if the house is enough to attract other people, what is it about the house that is attracting people so that we can begin to be proud of who we are? And it's not about being a color, it's about understanding who you are as an African. Because when you come to Africa, the other thing that you do realize is that we're not just one tone. We go from very fair, and our hair is different depending on where.
The most diverse DNA on earth. The most diverse DNA on earth.
So there's all that, and it's wonderful that. You're thinking about innovation, and because in Africa now we are talking about the way you said leapfrogging and early adopters. I think about Kenya and M-Pesa. Safaricom, I think, is one of the companies you've had the pleasure of working with. And what M-Pesa did for Kenya is truly amazing. I am challenged to think what it is that you can't buy with M-Pesa, from an air ticket to mortgage financing. So Africans are very good at leapfrogging, which brings me to the youth, right? So how do we grow our own timber on the continent?
So it's a journey, Ruth. It's a journey of, because there are nuances and elements of it that are cultural, that are intergenerational, that are super practical in terms of the lessons that one can take. I think one has to first really get a couple of things right. I think I would say, from a political context, our political class has to genuinely believe and understand, the generational dynamic and the generational advantage that Africa has over the rest of the world. Being the youngest, median age of 21, 22, being the youngest purely by age of all other continents on Earth, how do you ensure that we set that up? One or two generations down the line, we set up that platform for our young people. Right now, that's not happening. And the reason why it's not happening, we've got a lot of greed in our political class, that drives corruption, nepotism, divisiveness. Again, this can change. It's not impossible for it to change. We're seeing glimpses of that shift in places like the Sahel region. We're seeing glimpses of that shift in Kenya. We're yet to see some of those shifts in Southern Africa, but they will come. I think it's inevitable that they would come. The other side of it is cultural, because I think all of us have this very patriarchal structure to our cultural norms in all our traditions. To drive a future, men should not fear, older men should not fear younger men, and men in general should not fear women or, the ideas of the girl child. So again, I'm a father of three girls, and I take great pride in who they are as people, in how I shape the future for them. And the thing I loathe the most in terms of thinking is one day those girls are as bold as I've now, raised them, to ask me, Dad, what did you do to make society more equitable and more supportive of my vision as a young girl? And this is also part of the mission that I'm on, is to say, young girls, young women, have a value to contribute. Yes, I've got a young boy. He's pretty much well set, but so we have to support this idea that that stands in stark contrast culturally. We don't need to lose our sense of identity culturally in order for us to feel like we're losing something. the future is built by this kind of spirit of supporting young energy, youthful exuberance, and harnessing benefit and value. And then lastly, I think it's a calculus of saying, how do we become enablers and catalysts for this youthful future? Again, this is where, the whole question around the resources of our continent, how they're leveraged. I mean, it's very interesting, Ruth, when you start looking at some of these things where, we one of the continents on Earth that doesn't fully leverage its natural resources to drive a quantum of human development in its people. South Africa, we'll use South Africa as an example. South Africa is a treasure trove of natural resources. For me, if you ask me, if I was a leader of any of the political parties, opposition or otherwise, would really make a strong argument for our natural resources to be leveraged to support the poorest of our society, to alleviate the most disadvantaged and adversely affected, to make sure that their communities are sustainable, to make sure that a young child's dream, there's no reason South Africa should have a quintile-based education system. South Africa's education system should be supported by its mines and by its natural resources. South Africa's healthcare should be supported by its mines and its natural resources. This has no kind of bearing or effect on the broader South African economy, because South Africa's diversity of economy. I mean, if you think about the fact that by pure virtue of a single commodity resource, oil, Nigeria sustains and supports its country. Yes, it's not perfect, it can be better. And this is a debate I always have with people, is that I think until you've understood what's the diversity of the South African economy and you juxtaposition that against everybody else, you're not yet understanding Africa. Because a single commodity in Nigeria, which is oil, sustainably supports its GDP, and yet there are multitudes of gaps in Nigeria, with over 200 million people. They do their best, and I know many people who are doing even more of their best to try and leverage that human benefit that they have. But Nigeria's economy, in terms of financial services, in terms of hospitality and tourism, in terms of the diversity of, if Nigeria's economy was as diverse as South Africa, Nigeria will be leaps and frogs ahead of South Africa. Okay, South Africa has got a very developed, advanced, diverse economy, but yet the indigenous people of this country don't benefit from the natural resources as much as everywhere else.
It's interesting. They're bringing up so many different things in my mind now, because I'm thinking one of the things that I have to mention is the way greed keeps coming up in my conversations with people. And I heard the other day on a completely different interview on a different podcast, where the guest was asked, what if they had one thing to eliminate from the world, what would it be? And they said greed. And actually, when you look at that, it's behind colonialism.
100%.
It's behind corruption.
100%.
It's behind even, like crime.
So, Ruth, I want you to imagine you are living in the continent in Nairobi, circa 1969.
Right.
Okay.
I was alive, people.
So, you were 4 years old, but alive.
I was alive.
Yes, you're alive. But what's interesting about thinking about this, in fact, it's actually not even that time. It was 1973 that we reached a fork in the road on our continent.
Right. People do say that, because I think even when Kenya became independent, I think something was happening in Singapore, something was happening in Taiwan, more or less around the same time. Yeah.
So the way I want people to think about is that what was taken away from us as a people.
Absolutely.
You took a community of doers, first of all.
Yeah.
A community of doers.
Yeah.
Selfless in their belief.
Yeah.
Strong in their leadership.
Yeah.
Very much entrenched in their Pan-African beliefs,
right.
in their motivation. This was what was taken away from us. What was left behind was the conditions of what we have on the continent today is what was left behind. The remnants of that situation is what was left behind. Imagine hypothetically, very hypothetically, because we cannot go, there's no time machines that we can go back to that time. If we had gotten the promise of the continent based on what we thought we were going to get, how differently would our outlook be?
Vu, it's so interesting, because that takes me back to the preview. And whoever hasn't listened to the preview of Wasafiri Africa, this kind of just encapsulates what these conversations are about. What happened? Because when we left the starting gates, we were going to do amazing things, and we had it in us to do amazing things. When I think of Nigeria, just to pose against South Africa, I think that Nigerians have an amazing academic background. They are very well-learned people in very many different things. And I think that enables them to also have a lot more, intention in how they're going to use what they have. Whereas South Africa, the apartheid system kind of took care of that. And unfortunately, post-apartheid, the education system has also faltered. So you find that, like now there's a horrible statistic that came out last year that, 80% of the children under 10 cannot read for meaning in any language in South Africa.
Yep.
That is really sad, because what that does is that it eliminates the vast majority of South Africans from the global competitiveness, and then the people who are already privileged and going to private schools and getting this world-class education continue to be at the top of the food chain. And I have real problems with that because of what you mentioned, that this is a very wealthy country. And everywhere where there's a mine, there should be amazing schools. There should be world-class hospitals, not only in the major metropolitan areas. You see, the roads should be, stellar, because there's the minerals, there's the food, there's agricultural resources. It's just something, in my business in tourism, I say to people when they arrive, I say, you have arrived to the world in one country. Because to me, that's what South Africa is. Kudos to Kenya. I love my country, but it's the magic land, Kenya is the magic land. But for me, South Africa, you want to see whales, South Africa. The lion, South Africa. You want to see the elephant, the giraffe, South Africa. Penguins, South Africa.
Big Five.
All of them are there. And until recently, the great white shark, right? Then you come and you see the vineyards, and then you see the orchards, and then you see the mining and the wind veins that are just generating this electricity, and there's hope for more. There's the acres of solar. And you're thinking, my gosh, this is an amazing
How can
opportunity.
You have poor people?
Why is there poverty? Why is there the highest Gini coefficient in the world? Greed.
Because the beneficiation is kept. And again, a lot of our political class have become complicit, have become allied to the oppressor class, have become subservient once again. Right now, one of the biggest talking points in South Africa is a review of policies of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which are here called broad-based economic empowerment laws. There's an advocacy to do away with these policies. I mean, the World Bank is writing about this. But there's a whole underclass. And yet what people forget that in 30 years, there's been a frustration of the full application of these laws.
Right.
Even furthermore, there's been a bastardization of when these laws are being applied. The biggest beneficiaries of these laws are not black Africans. They are mainly white South Africans. They're the ones who control the funds, how the funds are allocated. Again, it's not illogical to understand that when the economy is 74% white-owned, who's making the business decisions around catalytically enable these policies?
But have the indigenous people who are in places of power, have they opened enough corridors for the people to come and walk through?
This is a general challenge in everything. And I always remind people that policymakers and politicians have got blunt instruments at their disposal. Their blunt instruments are basically policy, punitive kind of measures, taxation. So they've got these very limited tools. What I would hope would do is we would build bridges between at least those of us who are attempting to penetrate and bring about a new shift and a new alignment of thought. Because on the day, the analogy I always make, Ruth, I'll have to use a sports analogy for everybody. Hopefully they'll get it. If you're watching a football match or a rugby match or a cricket match, there's always two teams on the field playing. There's always a reserve bench on the field ready to replace for injuries or for fatigue or whatever. There's always an audience in the stadium watching the players play in the field. But there's also, and especially those of you who are football observers and watchers, there's always those people who are sitting in the parking lot, listening on the radio in the game that's being played on the field. Now, the analogy I always make, at least in the context of South Africa, is that a lot of black South Africans are those spectators who are in the parking lot of the game, tuned into the radio station, listening to the commentary of what's happening in the field. They're not on the reserve bench, they're not on the pitch, they're not even in the stadium. But when you go and talk to that person who says they're a business person in the economy, and you say, what happened in the game? I hear you were at the game. I was at the game. I was there. But they're regurgitating a third-party source, which is the radio and the commentator, what happened in the field as if they are playing in the field. Until we have some of us who are in the stadium, until we have some of us on the reserve bench, until we have some of us on the playing field. Okay? Nothing is likely to change, at least constructively, in the economy of our country.
I hear what you're saying, and I know, I just want to maybe segue from that a little bit. But before we do that, I just want to ask, in this game, the players who are actually there, who are representing the people who are listening on the radio or in the audience, are they playing for the other side? Are they?
So this is the thing.
This is the thing.
They get caught up.
Yeah.
They get caught up. And again, I always say, some of my favorite people in the world are politicians. It's a vocation that they've chosen, and again, I don't envy them at all. To some people, I might end up in politics myself, and I see possibilities.
He's just launched his career.
I see. Yeah, here we go. But in 10 years' time, but I see that future, right? In terms of if it's somehow, for now, my preoccupation is saying we gotta have something more, at least in the case of South Africa, and I know in other countries I've been to, it's relatable. There is a business class that is still very politically aligned.
I think the business class is what can change things.
Not for business sake only, though.
Not for business sake, but I'm saying for the community.
100%.
It's the business class that can change, as far as I see. It's the business class that can change it for the community, because they will do community-driven things that, how do you say, they why has the word gone out of my head? It's because they monetize those opportunities.
So what I always say,
build dispensaries, right?
You and I have had this conversation in a different context. So what I've always said is that, I love Ikaya, as you know, and I've always kind of given you a hard time to sort of say, why is it that you haven't seen the opportunity to take Ikaya, not only back to Kenya, but in markets where, again, it makes sense for you to take it back. Rwanda, Ghana, again, you can do market surveys, you can work with partners to drive the evolution. One day, maybe you'll talk about why that's not been possible. But I know you have said to me, you've now looked at that, and then you're always ready for partners to come to the table with
as opposed to I'm getting ready. Now I am ready.
What I always say is poor people can't innovate their way out of poverty. It always takes those of us who have the access, the privilege, who see the bigger picture. Because that day, what I always remind everybody about, even my own journey myself, is I don't come from wealth. I know it's not like I come from privilege. I'm very much connected to my village, my community in the township.
Which is your village?
In eMajwarheni, eTyhume. Shout out to my people there, where we still maintain a family homestead. And I'm still connected to my township, my hood, where I come from, Tanzania, NU7. And again, we're doing work there to drive social impact and to support the young people that are of this generation whose story could be easily like mine, it's those of us who have that opportunity, that access, that privilege. How are we doing it? Yes, it's still an effort and a lot of hard work to fully live up to our own kind of individual potential based on what we've seen. But we still have this responsibility to lead this transition.
100%. Yeah. I really think so. There was a day I was having a conversation with my brother a long time ago. I think it's about 10 years ago now. And we were talking about an analogy of cavemen. And so you're in the cave and you're like, whatever, you know. And then they learn, you know, oh my gosh, you guys, don't shit in the cave, you know, because it stinks. So then you say, okay, fine. So we've got to go outside and do our business because then we can live happily here. So to me, that's an analogy of let's not be corrupt. This is self-destructive
100%.
when we do this, okay? So then somebody goes out and, you know, doesn't come back. And then they come back after a while and they come back and they've killed a new kind of animal and it's a big feast for everybody and wow, this is amazing. Or they bring new crops. And so basically now you've got a torch in the sense that you've gone out and now you've come back. You have to come back to the cave.
Yeah.
You have to come back to the cave and show the people out. So it sounds
you
like...
start drawing a map.
You start drawing a map.
Telling them what's where. I went left and I saw this. I went right and I saw this.
And this is not like so out of our imagination thinking. I mean, think of Vasco da Gama landing in KwaZulu-Natal on Christmas Day, hence KwaZulu-Natal. But think of them landing there and putting up their pillars at Cape Point and all that. Then they went back to Portugal and said, guys, follow me. This is the way. We need to start doing that. The businessmen who can put up schools, who can put up hospitals, who can put up business centers and demonstrate ethics of living.
So
People will do
you're describing the journey that I've had in driving my curiosity on the continent. So again, for me, it was about, you know, what's the furthest place I could go? Like not necessarily by location or geography, but by perception of what I saw as opportunity to go. I've traveled to Equatorial Guinea. Most people don't know, even they couldn't even put it out of on a map. Why? Because it was one of the smaller countries. And again, unless we get every country on the continent, now I work with Burundi, again, the lowest GDP on the continent, okay, coming out of decades of civil war and strife, but a stable enough political climate that's interested in participating. The other day, you know, Africa is very funny. Africans are all the same all around the continent. It's very strange. But in a neighborhood on the continent, if Ruth paints her house, the entire neighborhood is going to start painting their house. We have this innate competitive nature of kind of how we see. The whole advantage and value of the African Union today is about if people can see an example out of South Africa, an example out of Kenya, an example out of Rwanda, suddenly everybody looks at Rwanda and says, no, but Rwanda is even smaller than me. You know, I have more. I mean, I remember Rwanda was not that great a couple of years ago. Why are they suddenly so great now?
Right.
What am I doing that Rwanda is doing that I should be doing? So we have this kind of notion that's kind of building out. And again, at the end of the day, everybody recognizes, you know, the perpetual fight and cultural kind of civil war has benefited nobody in the continent. Nobody has benefited when cousins are fighting. One cousin fighting another cousin. Yes, it's family dynamics, but why do we have to kill each other in order to prove a point?
100%.
So how do we, you know, again, you know, reframe the context in which we identify who our true enemy is? How do we leverage, like I said, the SWOT analysis? How do we acknowledge the opportunities and strengths that we have? How do we build? Okay, we have a wonderful diaspora who's desperate, that's being mistreated elsewhere in the world. And
they're an amazing source of foreign direct investment 100%. As well. You know,
why can't we bring them back? Somebody was saying, I know it's going to get a bit political, but somebody was saying the president of America has just commoditized the American green card or the nationality and put a price on it. So now we know the value of an American green card is $5 million. And they were saying, you know, why can't we just flip this whole kind of narrative on itself, where you say, if you are black and of African origin and you want to come back, why don't you just sell your American green card to somebody who's willing to pay you $5 million and come back to the continent?
Hey guys, this is a conversation, right? This is what happens.
Come back to the continent with that kind of money and reinvest in the future of the continent, versus, staying in America that's not creating value for you. Okay, yet you are sitting on a $5 million asset. That's more than anything else you have to own. And you are marginalized, frustrated, especially in the next 5 years of where the American economy is going. and then you just swap it out because the president has done it. He's made a transaction. Why is he allowed to sell the American travel card, and yet you as a citizen can't do the same if the president's transaction? But I digress.
Yes. So now, let's say
$5 million can go a long way in the content. By the way,
100%. Listen, I think I like the analogy of the painting of the house, and then your neighbors start painting it, or exactly what's happening actually. But perhaps it's because we're Africans and we camouflage, and then we begin to all look alike.
Yeah.
And then we begin to all look alike. We begin to look, it's the whole thing of nature, so that the enemy can't see you. The enemy is lack of progress, people. The enemy, to me, is when we are not taking full advantage of who we are. Yeah. That is the enemy.
Or participating in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, the one analogy, and I'll leave you with this thought for everybody listening. I always say to everybody, visualize an atlas, Ruth.
Yeah.
See the atlas. The one you were taught in geography.
Yes.
Africa in the middle being smaller proportionally.
It's big.
The United States and North America and Canada, South America, Asia, Russia. You see the
Australia,
the
New Zealand.
Australia, New Zealand. Visualize that as you're listening, dear listener. Now, when you think about it, and again, this is debatable, it's subjective. Who are the most empowered people on earth? Who are the people with, voice power, capital, resource power? We know the key voice on earth today, again, you can debate if you like, are Americans, in North America. They control wealth. Again, there's a bunch of data to support this kind of thinking.
The Chinese would refuse that.
Again, for me, I'm looking at the numbers. I'm looking at the data. I'm not thinking about...
But anyway, I don't want to be political. I want you to tell your story.
We can debate it, right? But to me, it's like North Americans, specifically Americans, have the highest wealth, the highest per capita wealth, the highest voice. I mean, we're seeing it now in the environment we're in Gaza, in Ukraine, and, political influence around the world. They have all the army bases in every corner on earth, et cetera, et cetera. So we know that they have the highest voice. The one thing that nobody can deny is that Africans have the lowest voice, okay? And we are about to see a dramatic impact on this, especially as foreign aid to Africa gets diminished with each passing year.
It's being closed off.
So for me, we have to figure this out. If we are in the context of the 6 continents, if we are number 6 out of 6, how is it that we again understand how we lift our voice? This is what our politicians are meant to figure out, where our voice has equal parity of opportunity, equal parity of impact, and equal parity of influence. Right now, we don't have that. There's a big distance. But I go further. When you look at the continental Africa itself, and you start saying, who has the highest weight of voice on continental Africa? You can go to every country on the continent. You can go to Kenya, you can go to Nigeria, you can come to South Africa. It's still going to be people who have a connection to the North or to the Western Alliance. It's going to be Caucasian South Africans. It's going to be Lebanese in Nigeria. It might be, Indians in Kenya. It might be even be Muzungus in Kenya, okay, who have the highest value of wealth, highest value of influence, et cetera, et cetera. The people, the natives of those countries, their voice is always going to be less than the weight of voice in wealth, in influence. They might have political emancipation, but they lack the wealth, they lack the influence to drive their own emancipation. So again, we know this. I mean, right now in the technology, digital ecosystem, Kenya is doing very well, but Kenyans themselves are complaining because it's the Mzungus that are getting the money, not local Kenyans who are getting the money. Yet these companies are identifying themselves as Kenyan companies that are run by the Mzungus. Nothing wrong with that. But there's something to be said contextually about that. South Africa, we know.
So it's up to us, the people who are on the ground, people who are on the day-to-day, ordinary people on the continent of Africa, to own who we are and start electing people who embody what it is that we are looking for.
Inshallah, if
we need
possible.
to be empowered. I think it has to start somewhere.
It has to
start with you, first of all, believing that you deserve a different outcome.
That's the point.
Because we cannot continue to do the same thing and expect a different result.
It is also about aspirational leadership, Bruce. That's why I say
but the youth are very important. I mean, I think the youth can, at that point where they're able to believe that it is possible for them to do
Depending
that.
on how their social influences come from.
That's true.
If we can't take lessons from the class of the 1960s and 70s, and we look at that as past tense, and we don't take the lessons, we are doomed to repeat the same mistakes.
Well,
so if we are inspired by that class that was selfless in its forgiving, that was aspirational in its objectivity in terms of the shape and look of the continent, that saw equity and humility and humanity as a foundational kind of cornerstone. Not this culture that we've adopted now that is very transactional, that is very hyper-commercialized, that is built on this lies and grandstanding and, again...
So we go back. We go back. And once again, if you haven't listened to the preview, I mean, what Vuyisa is saying actually just makes me more committed towards Safari Africa, because we go back to where we lost our way. We go back to the founders of Pan-Africanism and look at what their thinking was like, what their ideology was like, what they thought of themselves, and respect, because it is upon their shoulders that we stand on today. But on the continent, besides having very passionate discussions on politics, and no one should ever say they don't do politics, because politics is a way of life. It is what defines how you move around and who you are as a person.
You just have to understand where it fits
in. Need to understand where it fits in. We eat and we drink on the continent, and we love to do that, and we have festivals. So, Vu, you've been to like 20 countries in Africa. So when you think about that, what kind of foods have you enjoyed the most from? Where?
The most from?
Yeah, just three, because my goodness.
Listen, I always love Nigerian food. I just feel West African food in general, I think it's undervalued. In fact, it's a kind of food that's easily exportable in the same way Thai food has been exported, in the same way Indian food is exported.
I agree.
I think West Africans need to think about how they repackage and export their food, both because of the most populous part of the continent and the cultural influence that it is very centered on African values.
Yeah.
The little known fact that you don't know, Ruth, in my journey, my comeuppance at University of Cape Town, here in Cape Town, I started Afri-Cuisine as a restaurant. So I've always had this kind of curiosity about African food. So I would say Nigerian food very much sits at the top of my list. Second to Nigerian food would be South African food. I think South Africans, downplay the quality of our food. And then if I had to go for a third, would be, by the way, there's not too many differences between the food we eat in Southern Africa to the food we eat in East Africa. You can see the common thread, the commonality of value, and the Bantu influences that are shared common interests. So whenever I'm in Kenya, yes, we're gonna call things different names, but they're the same thing. We're gonna call different things, but they're ultimately the same thing. So nyama choma is no different to chisa nyama. It's like, come on, let's stop playing around. And then third would be, I think, in terms of uniquity of food and value, would be either Ethiopian or some of the stuff I've had in Equatorial Guinea, because in the day it's all very kind of clean, natural. But if I had to go for a cultural spin, I would say Ethiopian would be three for me.
Good. Those are all foods that I enjoy. I've never been to Equatorial Guinea, so that is going down on my list.
You'll eat sea snails.
Okay, that's fine.
But not escargot, no French influence.
I do seafood. I'm allergic to crustaceans, so I don't know about the sea snails because they have a shell.
Yeah.
But and then the music of the continent, what inspires you? What gets you going?
So I like to always tell anybody, we can have this debate, again, because there are multitude of influences when it comes to music. And again, being a Libra, I also have that artistic streak that curates for creative influence. And again,
looking for balance.
I always look for balance, and I always find the right musical choices. And again, I listen to music very broadly from West Africa, East Africa, and South. Mm-hmm. I believe we're the kings of music, being South African.
The music here, I'm bowing.
And out going to a debate and argue with anybody who cares to debate with me. Mm-hmm. The natural creative, God-given talents that come from the South. Musically, theatre, dance, are world class. And those influences, again, bring colour to the world. So I would say South African music is at the top. I'm not against Afrobeats. I'm not against the Nigerian influence of Afrobeats. I like a little bit of Afrobeats here. I'm not against East African music. I'm not against Zimbabwean music. I'm not against Malawian music.
Don't be defensive. Just tell us what you like.
Again, the pure bias is
That's allowed. It's a
South African music.
Yeah, but just one.
Not like a very long distance. Two would be very far down the line.
The spectators went home and they hadn't entered the arena.
On a playlist of 50 tracks, I would say the first 40 would be South African music. And then just for balance, the last 10 would be Afrobeats and others. One of each.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, we commend Afrobeats for coming into the stadium. The judges were still waiting there with the checkered flag to say he finished the race.
So it's a big gap. It's not like the food one where it's fairly evenly spread.
Yeah.
With the music, no, it's very distant. Very, very distant. And I think the world knows this. If you wanna be honest, my piano music is shaping the world, just like Kwaito did, just like all our music is done over the South African music.
Well, we play Tatikaya, so it's not like I'm gonna, we play in Ika we play Pan-African music, people. So thank you so much, Vuyisa. It's been such a pleasure to have a conversation with you today. As always, I've never actually asked you about your music before. I've never asked you about the food, but today now I know. So thank you so much. And to everyone who's been listening, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Wasafiri Africa. You're the heroes out there. Because you choose to listen to us, but because you're the movers and the shakers. People, let's do this. As we say in Wasafiri Africa, Twendeni, Africa is ready.